This is Ubuntu MATE 1904 final release. I've had all of the Ubuntu flavors, or the major flavors, installed on my external hard drive in legacy mode since they were released, and I've been taking my time looking at them. There are two reasons I'm starting with Ubuntu MATE. One is that it comes configured exactly the way I like it. I still prefer the old GNOME 2 layout, and this is very close to it. It has two panels. The major difference is that it now has the Brisk Menu instead of the familiar GNOME 2 menu bar, although that's still available. Here I've added some launchers, and it has a revised system tray to the right. At the bottom, at the left, it has a Show Desktop icon, a taskbar or space for window buttons, and 4 workspaces. And at the far right, it has a trash icon. The other reason is that this is a sequel of sorts to a video I made about Ubuntu MATE 1904 beta. And in that video, I found that the Linux Kernel 5.0 solved a problem I had been having with memory leaks and kernel versions 4.18 and 4.19. I'll put links to all these videos in the notes below. I was happy to confirm that the final release, which still has kernel 5.0, did not show any evidence of memory leaks or any other problems that I had found with other Linux kernels and my somewhat old but not ancient machine. So this works for me, whereas version 18.10 did not work at all, and version 18.04 worked but only with the 4.16 kernel on my computer. Yours, of course, might be different. Since I'm showing slides, I took this one of the output of free space-m, and I found that Ubuntu MATE was using 495 megabytes with only the desktop running. Now, another problem I was looking for was the problem I had with Ubuntu 18.04 installing my Epson scanner, and I made this previous video on how to do it because it didn't work in the traditional way. I noticed in running Synaptic Package Manager that libsane, the old sane utilities library, is now installed again in Ubuntu 1904. Previously, they had installed an experimental version of libsane 1, and I attributed that to the problems, so I thought perhaps that the problems were solved. However, I was wrong. Even with libsane installed again, I'm still having scanner problems. I still had to install the workaround that I covered in my video on scanner problems, and then it worked perfectly, as you can see in this video. So I'll include a link to the scanner video also in case you're also having problems with your scanner. Another old problem that still persists from version 1804 is that Pyrenamer, my favorite bulk renaming utility, is no longer available in the Ubuntu repositories. So I did another video on how to install that by getting it from the archives, and I'll put a link to that video also in case you use Pyrenamer. You'll still need that information. Aside from that, Ubuntu MATE 1904 is pretty much like earlier versions of Ubuntu MATE. It opens with the welcome screen by default, and of course you can uncheck this and turn it off. And this is very useful for getting your restricted codecs and other things set up your drivers, and of course I use the famous software boutique to install about a dozen applications that were not installed by default, and I'm not going to go over them, there were just too many. But this is well worth looking at before you do anything else. As far as the Brisk Menu, again, I've added so much I'm not going to go over all of the installed applications. But of course, one of the things of greatest interest is the MATE tweak. What I've done here under Desktop is I've left checked Show Desktop Icons because I want to use desktop icons for my own purposes. But I've unchecked the Computer, Home, Trash, Network, and Mounted Volumes icons. If I wanted those back, I could get them, of course. As far as the panel is concerned, you have a few things you can check here. Enable heads-up display, I think, is checked by default. Some of the other options are to enable dock, enable pull-down terminal. Enable keyboard LED is quite useful. This tells you whether your scroll lock, your number lock, and your caps lock are on. I'm going to leave the number lock on. For some reason, the scroll lock key on my computer doesn't work. And of course, there's a famous panel switcher. I've already saved my panel under a custom name, so I don't have to worry about losing it. And you have the contemporary panel. There's Cupertino, which refers to Apple, and you have the little dock with the animations down below. This is the familiar panel, which is the default panel that I'm using, except that I've, of course, added to it. This is the Mutiny panel, which is similar to Unity. If I open LibreOffice Writer, for instance, you see that I have the global menu on top. And if I press the Alt key, I get the heads-up display. That's also available in the Contemporary and Cupertino panel layouts. And of course, if you want to see an array of installed programs, click on the Ubuntu symbol up here. Then there's a netbook version with just one panel at the top. There's no window list, but you can open and close existing windows with the symbols. There's the Pantheon Desktop, which is similar to the desktop in Elementary OS. There's the Redmond Desktop, which is similar to the single panel layout in Windows. And there's the traditional desktop, which is virtually identical to the old GNOME 2 layout with the traditional GNOME 2 menu bar, applications, places, and system. If you prefer that, it's still available. I'm going back to my customized panel. This is an interim release that's supported for 9 months. That doesn't bother me because I've always treated the long-term releases as just another interim release. If you really need or want the long-term release, you're stuck with version 1804 for now. You may eventually get the new Linux kernel 5.0, but it's not available yet in 1804. So I can use this and really recommend it as a tremendous improvement over the last couple of releases of Ubuntu. This is XRAM Tech. Thanks for watching.